Reactor overloading.
Welcome everyone to the Quad Damage Podcast. I'm your host Robert. Sadly Deadforge can't be with us today, but joining me as usual is my co-hostess with the mostess, Midnight Medium.
Howdy, howdy.
Our guests today are bringing Sixy back. You heard me right, Sixy. As in at least 6 degrees of freedom like the new movement shooter Desecrators. Made by none other than the two people I'm pleased to welcome to the show, developers Oliver and Thomas. Welcome aboard, gentlemen.
Hello, Quad Damage.
Thank you.
Welcome. Good to have
Welcome. Let's get
you.
booming.
Get booming.
Gentlemen, thanks for joining us for this special episode of the Quad Damage Podcast. Just to kick things off then, and giving a little background upon yourself and your game. What is it that inspired you to make a 6 Degrees of Freedom flying game? Were there any particular titles or genres, perhaps, that inspired you to make this particular type of game?
Yeah, so the starting point there was we first been working on this sci-fi submarine game. Problem there was the game never really got into a good shape. It always kind of was awkward.
Right.
So we still wanted to do something vehicle related for different reasons. I'm just fond of that kind of game actually. And I always really liked Descent and Forsaken, and I always really wanted to do a game like that. So that's really where the idea came from. I just suggested we do a 6-stuff game, and Thomas was just in, so
Straight
we just got
away.
into it. Yeah. And in terms of inspirations, aside from Descent, Forsaken, and probably some other 6-stuffs I'm forgetting, Overload, of course, at least for me, this Serious Sam is also a big inspiration.
Serious Sam.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite franchises, but I would have not looked at Desecrators and thought that Serious Sam was an inspiration if you were to just take a screenshot of it. You know, it's all in the gameplay, no doubt.
Yeah, exactly. Just like you said, the graphics is inspired by those old 6-stuff games, but like the feeling of the gameplay, I don't know how to describe it, the preciseness maybe, how satisfying it is to use the weapons and how the enemies react. A lot of that is from Serious Sam, because I always really, really liked the gameplay there.
Yeah. Crow Team, they know what they do when it comes to that sort of thing. When I first booted up the game and started playing it, initially it reminded me of Unreal. I felt that it had a very Unreal, like the original, like 1990, was it 8 Unreal game? It had that sort of vibe to it. And then I started blasting things, and I wasn't very good at the game to begin with. I didn't realize you had to blast the gates open and stuff. So I was going around the room trying to figure out what to do before I figured out to blast the gate open, and then it was off to the horses. But Thomas, how did you get into gaming? How did you get to the point where you're like, yeah, I'm going to be on board with this project?
Well, I mean, it was actually, we had a common friend who said to us, hey, you should try making a game together.
Yeah.
So we tried, and especially back then I was very much a programmer first and game dev as a second thing.
Yeah.
So for me it was the fun technical challenge in the game Oliver proposed that really caught me up.
Nice. So you didn't know each other before you met to do this game?
We knew each other, drinking partners, I guess.
Drinking partners. There was many a night out there just knocking them back and just talking video games and stuff. Yeah. So in relation to the actual game itself, how did the two of you approach things like realism, that sort of thing, and accessibility, so that you were able to cater to both, I don't want to say Descent fans, but 6 Degrees of Freedom fans, and also cater to casual gamers?
So I think that there are really, you can see 3 categories, because you have Descent fans, Overload fans, then you have the hardcore boomer shooter players, but who don't really know fans, know Descent. And then you have more casual players.
Yeah.
And I don't think we really needed to do much for the hardcore 6 Degrees of Freedom fans. As long as we didn't have any barriers toward playing them, like we have this auto-level system where every group has an up direction, and then it kind of takes care of that direction on your own. You have less to worry about.
Yeah.
If you can disable that, then we don't really need to worry too much about the really hardcore Descent people, because they can figure out everything themselves.
Yeah.
If I could add something there, that is, at least from my perspective, a big part of it is just the controls. Like, if you don't have good feeling controls in the 6 stuff, it's just never gonna work.
Yeah.
So we spent so much time like working on the physics, just how the controls feel. Because you have to balance it with you're controlling the ship. It has momentum, it has physics, it has to feel like a spaceship. But if it feels too much like a spaceship, it feels floaty. People feel like they don't have control. They feel sick. So I think just making the controls feels good and responsive, you can really bring people in who maybe don't even really play 6 stuff, because like good feelings controls is just universal for. I think this is kind of a boomer shooter. I think that the movement is like 80% of it. So yeah,
very true.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the old Red Faction games with those vehicle sections and the art style. Very like accessible without sacrificing the immersion factor of it all.
Yeah, so that's actually a good point. I was focusing on the differences, but a lot of it is also just, going to people, giving them a Steam Deck, or giving a mouse or keyboard laptop, someone who doesn't seem familiar with Descent, and see how do they fare. Can you just pick it up? And then maybe we can add some hints or some other helpful tools for the less experienced people, and I hope a lot of these tools also end up helping the more hardcore players.
Are you familiar with the boomer shooter scene?
A bit, yeah. Mainly as a consumer.
Yeah. What games have you played? Not putting you on the spot.
No. Ultra Kill, Proteus.
Oh.
Some of the Dustman games. What was it? Don't remember the name.
There's a few of them. I'm looking forward to Dead Trash, which is coming out in a few days. But a lot of people like Reverend, and a lot of people like Satan, which just came out as well.
Yeah, it was Satan. I played through that.
Yeah, I can't believe it's made in easy FPS editor. It's some very talented
just about all
people.
Of them are, aren't they?
They are, yeah. It's the specialty. And I was joking with Sam. I was saying, like, anything that you publish has a grimy look to it, and anything that you make in house has this nice clean look to it as well. It's with you were mentioning how you cater to the casual players out there. Then, so how, when you're sitting down and you're designing the control scheme, tell me from your perspective as a developer, because we are not developers, how do you ensure that things like motion sickness and stuff like that are not a factor for people?
So it will. This kind of sick stuff will always be some people who just can't play it.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing for those people are the ability to refund the game.
Oh, okay.
So
you added the refund feature.
So
very easy to use.
Yeah,
but there are also things you can do, as Oliver said, the control feeling, and another part is there should be high enough frames per second. That's one thing that I think Microsoft did some research on it, where as the FPS increases to some limit, I don't remember what it is, it decreases the number of people who get motion sickness.
Yeah. I'd like to know what that figure is. I think as a PC gamer, you kind of take high frame rates for granted. And it's only when you go back to like playing on console or something that playing at 30 FPS, you're like, oh my god, it's a slideshow. I can't see anything going on right now. But yeah, I would like to check out what that was then. So do you have an unlimited frame cap, or are you gunning for a particular figure when it comes to frame rates?
Our hope is really the whatever the screen is set at.
Yeah.
But you can choose it. You can choose to set the unlimited or VSync or whatever.
Yeah.
Because maybe if you're on a laptop or some battery device, then having unlimited can really drain the battery.
Yeah. So that's why it was.
There's an important detail there, which what Thomas says is true, but also from my personal experience, and I'm very picky with how these games feel because I've played them a lot.
Yeah.
I don't never log it to my screen FPS because we don't use the standard Unity physics, which operate at like 60 FPS or something like that. That's what it's usually set at. To make the game feel right, we have our own physics system, which is actually tied to frame rate. That's why we target the game to be running at least 200 FPS, because that's where the physics feel right to me.
Oh, right. Okay, then.
The controls have to be as responsive as possible. So if your physics is running slower than your FPS, it just never feels right to me.
Yeah. I got it at 144, and I was impressed with that. I don't get many games play at 144, but it was absolutely smooth as butter for me. I don't know how I'd feel if it went down to 60 or something. Maybe I should take the power out of my laptop and it will choke it down, then see how I feel. Yeah. But in terms of the physics and the flight on it, and Medium, sorry if I'm talking over you, I seem to be on a roll asking questions. In terms of the physics and the flight, other than the FPS and what you were talking about, were there any like particular challenges that you had where it just wasn't feeling right and you were like, guys, we need to knuckle down and figure out how to fix this? How does that process work? Do you just keep playing it until it feels right?
The process for me was, we started doing the simplest implementation, which is, as we're making it Unity, then we're using the Unity physics for the ships and everything. But the problem there was, it never felt right to me, because one thing is simulating physics in a realistic way, but whether that feels right for the sixth game, that's probably not. Probably they make choices there you don't want to make. And we tried to make it work, we tried to do parameters, but it just never felt nice. Like, for instance, if you're not good at the game and you fly around in these levels, you're gonna hit a wall, you're gonna hit something. And how the ship reacts when it collides with something, that's really important. If your ship just like stops or bounces off, it gets annoying really quickly, because we're gonna do that over and over again.
Yeah.
And I spent so much time trying to make that work, and then in the end, I just told Thomas we have to rewrite it from scratch with our own physics.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And that was a lot. I think Thomas remember this, that I just spent so many late nights just sitting there doing this collision math. I just wanted it to feel right. Spent a lot of time looking at old games, because back then you didn't have these physics systems like Unity. So they all made their own system. They all feel different. So I looked at a lot of those and I tried to like figure out what they were doing and tried to replicate the parts I liked. And in the end, it ended up feeling exactly like what I wanted to do. But it took such a long time. Yeah. That was a challenge.
It sounds like a lot of trial and error. I mean, making boomer shooters is obviously very difficult, but when you start adding in things like movement physics for a ship in the air or something like that, I felt that it was very floaty, like I could feel that I was suspended in the air. So when I'm moving around and stuff, there wasn't any feeling of like this. It was beautiful and smooth as I was going around and going up and down. So I think you've really hit the nail on the head in regards to what you set out to do on that. But you said you were looking at older games. What older games were you looking at? I'm trying to avoid Descent. I'm trying to avoid talking about Descent, because that's the obvious one that everyone's going to be thinking of, right? I'm trying to formulate something that gets around talking about that.
Yeah, no, but luckily for you, I mean, Descent is... I like it a lot. It did a lot of things right, but when we're talking about the controls and physics, I feel that it's not really. I mean, the controls feel nice, but for instance, when you hit a wall in Descent 1 and 2, to me it's not that great. It really feels very jaggy. It feels punishing. Whereas I want it to be, if you are a new player and you hit the wall, the game should just smoothly continue. You shouldn't be punished for that mistake. So it's actually more like this Forsaken, Unreal, Serious Sam, because when you start noticing these details, when you're laser focused on making your collision right, you start noticing how all these games make these tiny choices in their own ways, and you see, like, when you just play a game now, you don't think about what happens when you run into a wall. But once you start noticing that, it's quite a deep topic.
Yeah.
So not Descent.
Yeah. So, I am curious. What is it about Serious Sam then that you took inspiration from? I played all of the Serious Sams in one go, like 2 years ago. So I went through a Serious Sam phase. And I came out of it thinking it was one of the best FPS franchises that have been created there. But what inspiration did you take from that?
I think it's the... How to describe it? Let me think just a second. So, when you play Sir Sam, you can both play in tiny corridors with 1 or 2 enemies, or you can play in these huge spawning areas with swarms of enemies approaching you. And both of those work. Both of those feel like precise, well-designed. The game accommodates both, but it never turns into like a mess or chaos, which it easily could. Usually in games, they're made for like one kind of scale, and once you go a bit past that, it just falls apart. I think Serious Sam has this really nice, what I describe as a clockwork feeling, where you know exactly how all the weapons work, you know exactly what the enemies are gonna do, and it's almost like you're playing this rapid-paced chess, and you have to make... There are only so many right choices you can make, at least on the high difficulties, without dying. And the game somehow does that both in these tiny labyrinths and in these huge landscapes, which I just think is really cool.
I think people forget when it comes to combat games that essentially combat is a game of chess. I mean, chess itself, of course, is a game of combat. It's kings, queens, knights, etc. It's warfare. But it's about outmaneuvering and outthinking your opponent. And then one of you has to die, unfortunately. So every encounter is a chess encounter.
It's like chess.
Exactly, I know, that's such a dumbass thing for me to say. But it is true. I was thinking more along the lines of like UFC fighting, for which I'm a fan of. And everyone's like, oh, it's just people punching each other. And when you try to break down that it's more than that, and I think it's the same for shooting games as well. When you break it down into actually how you have to think to be able to be successful in it, it literally becomes a game of chess. It's outmaneuvering your opponent to make sure that one of you is best in there. But are you saying then that there are going to be... I didn't get to play too much of it, unfortunately, but later on in the game, will there be like wide open spaces with 100 enemies against you or something like that?
Not 100. We're not 100 as good as Sir Sam there. But we do have some large areas. I think, like, to give an example why we're not doing it, if you ever played Descent 3, they made the leap of taking these 6 stuff games and putting them in wide open terrain areas, and that sounds very cool on paper, but in terms of gameplay, it doesn't really work out, I think, because the games are built around this very projectile-based combat with lots of slow-moving projectiles and taking cover. And then once you're in a big open area, you essentially have a space game, and then everything becomes boring because you're making no choices. There's no line of sight. There's no anything. You're just circle strafing each other, spamming and hoping to hit the other, and it just... I don't know. I just don't think as much we can do that.
Okay then.
Yeah, well, tell you what, we'll give you a break from the grilling questions on the game itself. And we'll
I am plowing ahead with them.
With some burning questions, as we call them. So I'll just ask both of you guys 3 questions. They're very informal, just sort of off the cuff answers that you can have. Basically, put the questions into a generator, it comes back with these fun questions that I'll just put to you real quick. Alrighty, Thomas, since we've been talking over here, let me get you in the game. Let me give you the first 3 questions here. First question, Mr. Thomas. Still with us, Mr. Thomas?
Yes, I am.
Yeah,
I'm just waiting.
There is a trick question that's been put in here as well.
Like,
yes. One of the questions will throw you.
Alrighty. First one, hopefully an easy one. What's the last goal you set for yourself that you have accomplished?
That's an easy one. It was releasing Desecrators.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Cool. Question number 2. What do you find is the most boring part of your life at the moment?
Oh, yeah, that's, I guess, doing my laundry.
Yeah. At least we get to put it outside now that the weather's getting better.
Cheers, Chan. Well, the good news is we passed that question flying colors because you didn't say the podcast you were on right now. Yes! We're taking it home. All right, question number 3. What is the most difficult choice that you have been asked to make? Getting deep.
I mean, beyond this question, actually, I'm not really sure. Yeah.
Don't be afraid to pass if you don't want to answer.
Yeah. I need to have some time to think about that, so I think I'll pass.
You'll be sat on the toilet later tonight. Let me think about that question. Deep in thought.
I do like the question itself being the most difficult thing you've been asked. I think that's I like how you tricked the question out of being asked. I think that's good. All right, Oliver. Hopefully this won't be as difficult, but I make no promises. I have no control over what the AI comes up with. All right, question number 1, Mr. Oliver. When you're by yourself, what do you usually think about?
The game. I think about the next feature I'm going to put in the game and how I'm going to do it.
You don't switch off?
No.
You're always thinking about the game?
Yeah. I'm bored of doing this.
The badass answer. Oh, follow-up question, just because I've been reading that Doom Guy book that John Romero just put out. I was curious if anybody else follows the line of thought that he used to do. Basically, when he was putting Doom together, the first one, every time they added a feature, they would play through the level with that feature, like back to front every time, just to make sure it worked. Do y'all do anything similar to that when you're testing, or you kind of add everything you want and then see how it all plays together all at once?
So we've been making the game for a long time now, so some features we can just put them in and we know they will work, but 95% of what we do, we play it many times. Like we put the feature in, play different levels, do test levels, but play testing things is the least hard. Yeah. That's a yes.
Yeah, makes sense. I didn't figure anybody could rigidly apply that principle that he had every single time. I was like, he just knows some things are going to work, but I bet there's other ones you're going to be like, this may seem small to add, but I bet it changes everything. If it doesn't work, we have to get rid of it fast, not waste any more time on it, that kind of thing. All right, question number 2. If Descent was never made, what would you be doing now?
What would I be doing now? I would still be making games, I'm quite sure. I just wouldn't be making Desecrators.
Yeah.
Nice.
I got an add-on to that question coming up later on, actually.
Oh. Segue. All right, cool. We'll table that for later. Number 3. What is your favorite room in the house and why?
It is my office, which is also my living room, because that's where I am 90% of the time.
It's a good combo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you both
work
work
and leisure
from
in the
home,
same
I
space.
assume?
Yes.
Yeah. my office here is my bedroom. So every time what you don't see is my missus. She's on the bed next to me, sleeping, watching TV. So she'll like, and then I'll laugh in the background, and she'll wake up. But we work from home as well, and you do spend 90%, just like you said. You spend it like in the one room that is your office. So you got to make sure you got to go out once in a while though and do something. But yeah, well. That was our burning questions round, formerly the rapid fire round. And gentlemen, thank you very much for taking part in that. But getting back to the game now, then, Desecrators. The one thing that I think I've asked you this in the past, and I don't know if you answered it or if I've forgotten the answer to it, but flight stick support. Is this something that you would ever consider, or is it on the cards already?
It is already. There's already support in the game for flight stick.
Okay, because nice. I got one up there, so that's something that I need to test out. But yeah.
So one thing I heard is that some people for these 6 games like called Hosas, where you have 2 sticks, one on each hand, and some like a throttle and a stick. And I guess you could also use stick and mouse. I'm not really sure how that will work.
Yeah, I can't picture that. I'm sure in reality, when you're trying it, it doesn't look like, you're trying to make love to an octopus. But, it probably looks like it'll work or something like that. But what about VR, though? Would you ever try VR?
Yes, we have actually changed our opinion and now are planning to support VR within 3 months. That's 3 at least months. The hope.
Oh.
I thought that I was asking questions that you'd be like, yeah, maybe one day we'll do it. You've already got all these things planned out there. It's like you've got your whole universe or something for Desecrators that's being done.
Our original opinion was that it's... So in VR games, you have this called intensity of the experience. And Desecrators will be very intense. So we kind of had the feeling that maybe it won't be for very many people.
Yeah.
But it has been a really requested feature.
Yeah. Well,
speaking of the universe, are there any story considerations? I know people think, oh, it's just a game where you fly around and you just kind of do the sim thing. But are there are y'all paying attention to like the world building and crafting a world around kind of the action itself?
Yeah, we have world building. We mostly use it to inform like what we put in the game in terms of location, weapons, enemies. We have our own background for why they look like how they look, or what weapons they like, the technology used, or the locations you're at.
Yeah.
After putting them in the game, we don't really have a traditional narrative, but we do have like these stylistic consistencies, or whatever you want to call them. So if you pay attention, there is world building in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
We do want to add more explicit story into the game. That's something we want to do in future updates, because we honestly didn't have time to do too much of that. We just had to make the game itself good enough.
Yeah.
And it is this roguelike, very gameplay focused thing, so story is not the most important thing.
So are you subscribing to the old John Carmack way of thinking things, that its storyline isn't particularly important, or are you, by the end of its development, is it going to have like a big in-depth story that takes you on an odyssey somewhere?
Yeah, no, I don't entirely subscribe to that, but I feel for this game, it's not really about having a storyline that, like, we don't want to set out to tell this story with these characters and this like linear progression. We want the story to be a narrative that fits what the player is doing. So we want we want like to be able to tell stories with the events happening in a playthrough. So in my ideal world, if you played the game for an hour and you could describe your run to midnight and you could describe it as a story with like clear beats and events, that's when I feel it's really interesting, when it feels like it's telling the player story and not like some narrative you're gonna see 1,000 times, because this is a roguelike. Yeah.
I actually appreciate y'all saying that, because I know a lot of indie game, and maybe just in general, I feel like people feel a pressure to put together like a really important story, and if it doesn't feel important, they have to talk it up like it is, so that people are anticipating it being, and maybe sort of reading that in, even if it's not necessarily that deep. So yeah, I think it's good to kind of be upfront that it's like, we're not, if you like what story beats there are, that's fine, but we're not we're not trying to build them up to be more than they are, Because indie boomer shooters have a real tendency of being like, we have an incredible story and I've thought everything out, and then it's like 2 audio logs and they're like, see. And you're like, I mean, I'm sure you get a lot out of that because it's all in your head, but I'm not sure if that really translates.
Yeah. It's good to concentrate on the game that you're on right now. You don't have to be like James Cameron and just write 5 Avatar movies in advance before you've even made, your first one. It's good to kind of build that world as you're going along and creating it. But with Desecrators, this particular game here, are there any like technologies that you've been like, we need to utilize this to push the genre forward? Or have you simply kind of, this is what makes it work, so this is what we're going to do? Which approach did you take?
Guess a bit of both. I mean, it's not like the traditional six of games.
Yeah.
Because we have added some of these roguelike elements to spice it up. So I guess that I don't know if that pushes the boundaries or try to move it in a different direction. But I think one feature we added is some navigational tools. You can say you have a way to say, I want the next unexplored area, whatever it is. Show me the way.
Yeah.
That tool means that we can make more confusing levels, since if people get lost, the players get lost, they can use the tools to find their way if they need to.
Yeah. Did you ever get lost doing it? You're like, I don't know where the hell I am, and I made the game.
Actually, I noticed that my spatial awareness became a lot better after working with the game.
Really? Ah. That's not a side effect I would have thought of.
Yeah, and then once I added this feature, my spatial awareness became better again.
Yeah.
Some people get motion sick. You just literally got you leveled up.
Yeah, yeah. Suddenly you can
That's
see
awesome.
all the cars around you and stuff, and all you're doing is looking forward. It'd be like Neo from the Matrix. You can see the illusion behind what you're looking at. But in terms of the level and environmental design, speaking of that, how do you optimize that in the context of like a 6 Degrees of Freedom? Because the game is as much vertical, of course, as it is level. Most people, certainly our viewers that watch this anyway, are used to pushing forward and shooting. Movement shooters, they are a thing. Turbo Overkill is a great example of one, where there's great verticality, and a Doom Eternal as well. I don't know if you've played many of the Doom games. But how do you design a level where you're like, players need to be able to go everywhere around here?
So, I think the biggest difference compared to, take Doom or some other Serious Sam game like that, that is that since we have this vehicle physics movement, then you don't really, you move like in smoother curves. How I think about it is when you make the level or you make the components that generate the level, it has to be almost like a roller coaster. You have to be able to fly in smooth curves up and down.
Yeah.
You can't have too many sharp turns or small openings, because that's not as fun to use.
It's really tight in the combat. You can be like, I was going everywhere perfectly fine. It's all kind of puzzles and exploration trying to figure out. And then as soon as something started shooting at me, I lost my shit and I ran like a little bloody girl away from them. And that was like the hardest thing for me to do, is to adjust to moving in a 3-dimensional environment whilst engaging in combat. It's like, I know it sounds stupid, but it is literally a completely different dimension of combat in it. And the closest that I could come up with was one of actually my favorite games. It's called Sprawl, and there's a lot of parkour in it. So you do a lot of combat against something while you're not on the ground. You're up in the air, you're jumping, you're flipping around, etc. And I found that playing Desecrators brought back a lot of that sort of feeling to me, because it was all about how can I maneuver around the enemy to attack it rather than just attacking it head on, because I was getting absolutely hammered. I got hammered by the first two enemies that I came across. Two of them just literally, it opens up, I see two enemies there, my immediate thought is, shit, what do I do? You know? And then they started attacking me and I scampered. And you've really got to come back and kind of gather your thoughts and think, how do I attack this? Whilst, being in a around sort of motion. But going from what I was saying earlier on, if you said that you'd still be a developer, and this game has roguelike elements, if you weren't making this particular game, what type of game do you think you would make?
Well, I actually am not. Personally, I'm not the genre. Genre doesn't matter that much for me.
Yeah.
For me, it's more about the interesting systems in the game itself that's fun to play with.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I leave the more overall direction to Oliver, at least while you keep having fun ideas.
Yeah.
Now, on that same note, is the Sixth Off games kind of like y'all's jam? Y'all think you're going to be with for the foreseeable future, or do you think you might branch out and maybe have a genre here or there that's a little bit more distinct, or go a different direction, or stick with what works, what you like?
So we haven't decided on a next game yet. We haven't decided where we finish with Desecrators either. But I think if we were making a Sixth Off again, now that we have explored Desecrators for at least 5 years, you have a really good feeling for how the system works, why the 90s game did them like they did, and all of this. You really understand how the pieces are put together. So I would definitely try to make it different somehow. There's some things I would leave out completely. I've always told Thomas I would like to focus more on the horror aspect, because I think this whole thing of being in a complex environment where you can be attacked from all sides, it can be disorienting, and then also having it be scary at the same time. I think that's really interesting. So
I'm into that. Yeah. It's right at my alley.
Well, horror is a genre that it's perennially popular. So if you were to take the horror route, there'd already be an inbuilt audience there waiting for you that would enjoy that. And how many? What did you call it? Sixth Off? I've never heard that saying before. That's an actual. Is it?
That's an actual term. 6 Degrees of Freedom. I also didn't know it until we had to put this game on Steam, and then we had to call it something.
But name another Sixth Off horror game. It's like, I can't. You'd have cornered the whole market to yourself if you took that approach.
I think back when it came out, Descent was kind of that. It was scary, at least when I played it. But that's the only one.
With the older games, that like Doom is a horror game, the original 1993 one as well. But people tend to forget that the perception of horror changes over time. It's like there's gory horror and then the psychological horror and that sort of thing as well. So when you go back and you play a game like Descent or Doom, you do tend to forget that yes, they actually were, in their own respects, horror games as well, even if it's not what you would consider to be kind of horror in the modern world. But I'd absolutely be totally jazzed to see a Desecrators horror take on it. Or maybe even like a fantasy version as well. I reckon that would be pretty rad. Because sci-fi and fantasy always gonna go hand in hand, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and comic book.
We do have a pretty good question from our last guest, the BioCrisis dev.
We
Jim.
do, yes. A very strange question. Which,
And it's a simple one, but I think it'll have an interesting answer, and it's for both of you. And debate is needed. But what is the best Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? It's a tough one.
Commando.
For me, it's
I didn't see
True
that.
Lies.
Oh yeah.
True Lies.
So
Nobody chooses True Lies. That was
know,
one that
right?
I didn't. Everyone's always, it's the Terminator, it's Predator, that sort of thing. True Lies is his 90s phase where I think things were changing for him because he did Eraser and Last Action Hero. He'd already done his comedy, little phase. But True Lies is an absolutely blasting movie, especially because it's made by James Cameron, of course. But what is it about that film that, appeals to you?
I think it had Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then I really like the explosions in True Lies and all the mayhem, the spectacle.
Yeah, it's very practical, and also probably Jamie Lee Curtis at her peak as well. Chef's kiss. That's what it was. Yeah.
I think I would like to mention that when we talked about how we are pushing features and technologies for the genre, I think Thomas was underselling a bit what we have achieved there, because we did do some pretty new things, mostly when it comes to the level generation and co-op, because of course other Sixth games, they've had levels and they've had co-op, but most of those were pretty bad co-op implementations. They were just slapped on it pretty much.
Right.
We built it from the ground up with that idea, and also procedural level generation in full 3D with multiplayer is pretty hard to do. And we also made the ambitious decision that when it comes to our level generation, we didn't want to do what most these procedural games do, which is you have like pre-made pieces, like blocks of a level you put together. We said we want also those pieces to be generated procedurally. So we essentially have like a tool inside the game that will build like 3D models from the ground up with like vertices and all of this, and texture them, and then make those into components that are put together for the level. So you don't have any repeating pieces. Everything is made from scratch every time. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Cool. Why did you choose Unity? Is this because this is what your background is in game development, or did you specifically think that Unity had all of the tools?
I had experience in it. I think that was the main thing.
Yeah. Thomas, what
when
about
you make
yourself?
a game like... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, for my case, I didn't really care, but he had experience in it, and I liked working with C#.
Yeah. Have you seen Mecha Blood? Is it called Mecha Blood? It's like
Sounds
Descent.
like an anime.
let me Google it. I'm worried that it's the wrong thing now. Mekka Blood.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah.
I was right. Yeah. This is the reason why, if you were to Google it and you saw it, this is the reason why I asked you about the game engine. I don't know what game engine this is made in, but to me, it's like almost like a GZ Doom version of Desecrators. And I wonder how different it is making a game like Desecrators in different game engines. Would you ever make like a sequel in a different game engine, or would you stick with Unity?
So, when we talk about Unity, the thing is that we are using it, but we are mostly using it for like the tools, like how like the tool set for running your code and debugging it and looking at your objects. But Unity has a lot of built-in stuff like the physics and the lighting and all of this, but we don't really use that because the game has to look very specific aesthetic we're going for.
Yeah.
So in the end, we're building everything ourselves pretty much. So it's not really that much Unity. So I think if we were using Unreal or some other engine, we would have to build everything ourselves anyway. Unless you're talking about using Quake 2 engine or something, which already looks that way.
So
it does. That's actually the game that was on the tip of my tongue. I said Red Faction, like the very first one, it was still an FPS. But you're right, it was Quake 2. It was actually like the texture, the palette, and the colors and everything. I was like, it's Quake 2, isn't it? Yeah. Glad you mentioned that. I was like, I know I'm not saying one of the games I mean, but yeah, there it is.
Yeah. I think with Unity, I mean, you've worked on it for so long. You said 5 years, right? So you were clearly working on it when that whole Unity debacle happened, where they were going to charge you with all the installs and stuff. How did you react to that?
We were still on the old license. We rarely update the engine because we don't use any of the features. So we were fine. We're just kind of shocked that we're making a mistake like that.
I don't think anybody saw it. It was possibly one of the stupidest business decisions I've ever seen in my life. And as soon as you heard that announcement, you knew Unity had basically fucked themselves. There was no way that anyone was going to accept it. And I just thought of all the people out there, like Proteus, you mentioned Proteus earlier, that's made in Unity as well. The devs on Proteus are making an expansion to it, the Elder Vale. And I was just like, how is it going to affect all of the games that are currently in development or something? But I'm glad that they reversed the decision. I'm glad that the idiot that made it stepped down, because I think that it made the industry a better place. And right now it's in a difficult place. Indie developers like yourselves are really the people that are holding the industry up, because AAA is destroyed. I don't know if you'd ever say, like, Desecrators was a colossal financial success. You were done for the rest of your life. You are rich now. If you made a sequel, would you stay true to the themes and design of what it is, or would you like go bigger and better and almost, AAA it?
Would like to go bigger, but I think when you say that, I'm just thinking about the amount of resources and most of all the amount of people you will need to make this game. And I think it's really hard to stick to a vision like a 6-star game if you have 50 people working on it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go that big. I would hire some very talented musician artists, but I would still stick with not just like a AAA high fidelity aesthetic. I would think something slightly different, but not necessarily 90s graphics.
Oh, okay then.
Yeah, but I would want to keep it focused still. I don't think it has the mass appeal that it really makes sense either to make a big, expensive 6-star game. I don't really see that.
Yeah.
So maybe instead of like going bigger and wider and that sort of thing, simply giving each game its own distinctive flavor so that it stood out. So if you ended up making like 5 of them, you said you wouldn't want to do 90s graphics. So like, say your first game was your 90s graphics, the second game would emulate 2000s graphics, the third game 2010 graphics or something like that. I think that would be quite a unique idea in relation to it. But, gentlemen,
all right, folks. Well, if you've been liking what you're hearing so far and you're like, where can I get one of the rare gems that is a 6 Degrees of Freedom game or 6 stuff? Well, you're in luck, because we've got 5 of them to give away to you and, well, to you. At least 5, not 6. Although if we had our way, it'd be 6 in total. We'd have that perfect symmetry there. But 5 lucky mofos get a chance. And the way you enter that is just in the comments below. Just say what your favorite 6 stuff is, and we'll get in touch and we'll hook you up. So yeah, free Desecrators for you, and that's all you gotta do.
Yep.
Win.
And for the people that entered last week's competition for the BioCrisis ones, we're choosing the winners tomorrow. Now that we've recorded this episode here, we're going to be reaching out to you guys. So by the time you see this episode, check the YouTube comments. I may have left a comment under your entry on there telling you that you've won a BioCrisis one. But speaking of developers, so BioCrisis' developer Jim, he asked you a question about Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna have Rafael Calantonio on, if not the next episode, then the second next episode. Yeah, either one.
Go ahead. My question would be, what's your ideal game budget?
Budget? Oh.
Interesting. I like that.
Raph would be like, yeah, give me 500 million. I should be fine.
But then he made Weird West on a much smaller budget.
I know, yeah. I was looking at it earlier today.
And to be honest with you, maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't remember the Arcane games having huge budgets comparatively, just in the scope of like their like other games.
Yeah, I think when you look at Bethesda, when you look at Bethesda's other games, I think the other games got a lot more budget. But the thing with Arcane, of course, it's very visually distinctive, so you can kind of cover up, the lack of any budget compared to your competition by making up for it with a distinctive art style.
Of course, I say there's not a budget, and then of course I'm not speaking of the marketing budget that Bethesda would furnish them, which is a whole thing, because you can make quite a bit happen with a huge marketing budget when you only spend so much to make a thing. So
you can, yeah. Let's talk about the future. So, give us the lowdown on what the future is for Desecrators in terms of both your immediate future. Thomas, I don't know if you want to give us an answer to that, and or if you want to give us an idea of what the long-term plan for Desecrators is. So starting with...
Yeah, I mean, in the immediate future, we plan on releasing a roadmap for the future, you can say. And I think we have plans for at least a year more development for Desecrators. And the roadmap we release won't contain everything. It just, I guess the next 6 months or something like that about what we are developing on. In early access, there is kind of this expectation of continued development. So we didn't really feel the need for a roadmap.
Yeah.
But now, when we are in release, it's a bit more question of do we keep developing or not. I guess I should have a caveat that for the expectation to stay true in early access, you have to keep releasing updates. Otherwise...
Right.
Well, as one of our guest hosts last week, Ranger, said, essentially early access, he says that he thinks of it as the old shareware model, but now there's money involved. You're getting that first initial one with the expectation that development will continue on that game until there is a final product that is released to the public on it. So you are right, I think people do expect development to not only to continue on it, but for the public to be updated on what's going on. People are ravenous for information. They want to know what's happening all the time when it comes to their favorite games. But Oliver, moving over to yourself then, you've alluded to it in in previous questions, but where do you see things 3 years from now? What is the longer distance sort of?
3 years from now.
Other than you being rich as hell and buying your own island.
Yeah, well, that's a given.
That's a given.
So 3 years from now, I imagine I will have started on whatever our next game will be.
Yeah. Which is the horror one. Hopefully. The horror one.
It could be the horror one, yeah.
Yeah.
6 degrees of horror.
Yeah, we have a number of ideas. I think it depends on how you, what inspires you at that time and what you think you could actually sell.
Yeah.
It might be, since we worked on Desecrators for 8 years at that time, maybe we don't want to do 6 stuff.
God. I can't imagine what it's like to dedicate something to 8 years of your life. That's a whole console generation, essentially, that you've dedicated to this game here. So, to say it's a passion project, I guess, is a vast understatement. By the time you finish Desecrators 3, be balding, you'll have grey hair like this. It takes so long to do. But you'd be very proud of what it is that you've created, which is fantastic. So thanks for telling us about, the immediate and the long-term future on there.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for yet another little slightly different episode of Quad Damage. And I say that because it's a genre rarely tapped and sorely underrepresented in the space. So Thomas and Oliver, I really appreciate you guys coming on and kind of giving us that window into something. Because I know I always see Descent kind of over here by itself as the game that you can like if you're that type of player. So it's kind of nice to give it more of a spotlight, not just for me personally, but just in terms of this episode going out and going to the wider boomer shooter community. Hopefully we can kind of generate a little bit more buzz around an underrated genre, let's say. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. It's a pleasure.
Thank you too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry,
I heard a deep breath.
Yeah. No, I was waiting for you, so I was
I got
just
really
in
excited.
case. Yeah.
Cool beans. Well, I'm Midnight Medium. You can, of course, find me on YouTube, and I talk for extended periods of time. And don't lose my breath somehow. I never get tired of hearing myself talk, apparently. You can find me at Midnight Medium YouTube, a Midnight Medium on Twitter, all those kinds of things, Patreon, all the assorted social media business.
OnlyFans.
Where can we find? Yeah. Coming soon to a desktop near you.
So am I.
Use the incognito browser. That's all I'm saying. It's pretty spicy.
Yeah.
Now, Robert, where can we find your even wilder content on the interwebs and associated quad damage media posts?
Associated Quad Damage, well, of course you can find us on YouTube because you're watching us now, but please join our memberships, visit our affiliate store, buy our merchandise. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's the Quad Dam Podcast, and on Blue Sky, it's the Quad Damage Podcast. And I'm frequently on Reddit now. Apparently I have like a 150-day streak or something that they told me I've got. I had no idea I'd spent so long on Reddit, but you can follow Quad Damage there as well.
We go dumpster diving on Reddit too. What? All right, gentlemen. And if they'd like to keep up with that fully released game, Desecrators, where can they keep up and be abreast of the content roadmap that you've got coming out? What are the best places?
Oh, they can, of course, look at our Steam page, because that's where the roadmap eventually will end up. But if they really care about the game, which for sure they will, it's great, they should come to our Discord and participate there, because a lot of players hang out there. We discuss also like what we put in the game and suggestions for new ideas, feedback, all of that. So if you're into participating, come there.
Cool.
Sounds good to me. And I assume we could probably put that Discord link in our own description if you'd like to, right? I assume, Robert?
Yeah. I usually stick three links in there, so I've got the Blue Sky one, I've got your Twitter one. So if you want to send me your Discord link, I'll stick that in the video description.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Well, guys?
Yep.
If that's all she wrote, then we'll leave you for the time being, partying in such sweet sorrow. But until next time, keep on booming.
I don't know why I said that like I was about to fall asleep or something. Then I was like, keep on booming.